Life is full of surprises, but sometimes life is stranger than fiction. Let's take a look at 15 of the most unlikely events that ever happened. Number 15. Elvita Adams. In 1979, Elvita Adams was admitted to Bellevue Hospital in New York City with a broken pelvis. She had jumped from the 86th story of the Empire State Building and survived. All it took was a little bit of luck and some strong gusts of wind. Elvita was 29 years old at the time of the event. The observation deck where she jumped from was surrounded by an 11-foot spiked fence, but no one saw Elvita climb over. But how she got over that fence is a mystery unto itself. But then how did she survive the plunge in the first place? Well, it turns out that after she jumped, strong gusts of wind moved her in just the right place at just the right time for her to land into the shrubs on the platform of the 85th floor. And although she only plunged one story, that's still a 20-foot drop. Number 14. Roy Sullivan. Roy Sullivan was a ranger in Shenandoah National Park, known for keeping a certain souvenir with him, his tan ranger hat with 2 singed holes at the top. So what unlikely event had befallen Sullivan years before? Well, Roy Sullivan has been struck by lightning on 7 separate occasions. That's more than anyone in recorded history, and it even got him into the Guinness Book of Records. It's hard enough to be struck by lightning once, with a 1 in 500,000 chance, but 7 times? Try 1 in an octillion. Each lightning bolt can pack about 100 million volts. Roy's first recorded instance was in 1942, and the final was in 1977, during a fishing trip where he claims to have also fought a bear with a tree branch. All of these brushes with Mother Nature earned him the loving nicknames of Human Lightning Rod and Human Lightning Conductor. Number 13. Anne Hodges. On one sunny afternoon in Alabama, 1954, Anne Hodges was taking a well-deserved nap on her couch. All was well, until something came crashing through the roof of her home, striking her right in the side of her body. This grapefruit-sized rock that now lay in the middle of her living room traveled all the way from space to wake her up. Anne Hodges was struck by a meteorite. In a very unlikely but very lucky turn of events, survived. Of course, she immediately went to the emergency room but was able to walk away with nothing but some swelling to her hand and thigh, and a huge bruise the size of a pineapple. The meteorite weighed 8.5 pounds, and Anne Hodges went in the history books as the first recorded human to have ever been struck by a meteorite. And perhaps if the meteorite had moved an inch to the left or right, we would have heard a much different, much more unfortunate story. Number 12. Vesna Vulovic. The year is 1972, and Vesna Vulovic is a flight attendant aboard Yugoslav Airlines Douglas DC-9. It was a routine flight until an explosion on board sent the plane plummeting through the air. Authorities suspected that a bomb was planted during a layover in Denmark, and tragically all 27 of the passengers and crew died, except for Vesna Vulovic. Vesna had been trapped by a food cart in the tail section of the plane as it plummeted 33,000 feet for 3 minutes into the snowy mountains below. A nearby woodsman heard Vesna's screams and rescued her, not just from the debris of the plane, but from the freezing temperatures. She was immediately rushed to the hospital, where she fell into a coma for 10 days. She suffered from a fractured skull, 2 crushed vertebrae, a broken pelvis, 2 broken legs, and several broken ribs, and was paralyzed from the waist down. But in time, she made a full recovery and even returned to work for the same airline. In 1985, Vesna made it into the Guinness Book of World Records for surviving the longest fall without a parachute. Perhaps even luckier than being able to walk away from the unlikely event, she had no memory of her accident. Number 11. Alexis Goggins. The next entry on our list is less than an awful accident and more of an act of heroism. In 2007, 7-year-old Alexis Goggins was kidnapped along with her mother. When they tried to make their escape, the kidnapper started shooting, but the brave Alexis Goggins jumped in front of her mother, saving her life. Luckily, young Alexis's story did not end there. Despite shielding her mother and being shot 6 times, she survived the near-death experience. She was rushed to the hospital where she lost an eye, and doctors told her mother that Alexis would never walk or talk again. 2 months and 6 surgeries later, she proved them all wrong. She made a full recovery and was able to continue living a normal life. So Alexis's story is 2 unlikely events for the price of 1, and with a very happy ending. Number 10. Brent Casey. It's one thing to be attacked by a bear, but to survive the mauling is a feat unto itself. But in British Columbia in 2008, Brent Casey did just that. Brent was 53 years old when a bear suddenly attacked him from behind and put his head right in its jaws. Brent reported that he could feel the bear tearing off his scalp and eating his brain. But despite the pain and fear of death, he knew the best chance he had was to play dead. Brent dropped down into a fetal position as best he could, but the bear continued to bite and claw, ripping into his arm and barely missing a major artery. Eventually, the bear lost interest in Brent, but he didn't wait long for help to arrive. Ever the survivor, Brent hopped into his car and drove 25 kilometers to a gas station to try to get some help. And driving after a bear has mauled you is no easy task, but Brent was still somehow able to keep himself awake and alert long enough to live to tell the tale. Number 9. Joan R. Ginther. With 1 in almost 300 million odds, it's tough enough to win the lottery, even once. But how about 4 times? Joan R. Ginther has won the lottery 4 different times between the years 1993 and 2010. Her first winning was $5.4 million, and her next came in 2006 with $2 million, her third in 2008 with $3 million, and the final was a whopping $10 million. That's a total of $20.4 million, and the odds of all 4 wins in one lifetime are about 1 in 18 septillion, or 10 to the power of 42. It's more zeros than we'd like to count. To make things even more unlikely, all of her winning tickets and scratchers came from Texas, and she bought 2 of them from the same convenience store in her hometown of Bishop. Despite her massive winnings, Joan Ginther keeps a pretty low profile and avoided any interviews, so her secret to success still remains a secret. And in maybe a not-so-surprising turn of events, she relocated to Las Vegas, although the jury's still out on whether or not she gambled away that $20 million. We're constantly adding more people to the Top 5's production team to bring you all the best content. Be sure to subscribe with notifications on and hit the like button. Number 8. Tsutomu Yamaguchi. Tsutomu Yamaguchi was a Japanese salaryman away on business in Hiroshima, Japan, in August of 1945. And if you know your history, then you'll know that that's the same month the United States dropped an atomic bomb in the city. Like many citizens of Hiroshima, Yamaguchi felt the brunt force and horrors of nuclear war when he was just 3 kilometers away from the initial blast zone. He suffered from temporary blindness and horrific burns all over his body, but he survived. The next morning, he still needed to get home, so he braved the radiation fallout to catch a train back home. Where did Mr. Yamaguchi live? Nagasaki, the site of the second atomic bomb. Yamaguchi's home was targeted just 2 days after the events of Hiroshima, and he once again found himself within 3 kilometers of the blast zone. But again, he survived, this time unscathed. Decades later, in 2009, the Japanese government officially recognized Yamaguchi as the lone survivor of both atomic bombings. Yamaguchi lived to be 93 years old and was a leading figure in the fight to abolish nuclear weapons. Number 7. Bill Morgan. In 1998, the Australian Bill Morgan died from a heart attack, but after attempting to revive him for 14 minutes, he was brought back to the realm of the living, only to spend the next 15 days in a coma. He was dubbed a medical miracle and was given a second chance at life. About a year after the near-death experience, he bought a simple scratcher ticket and won a brand new Toyota Corolla worth $30,000. This immediately caught the media's attention, and he was interviewed shortly after. The crew asked him to recreate the moment by buying a new scratcher and pretending to win for the camera. Except Bill Morgan didn't have to pretend because he won again, $250,000 to be exact. Some amazing stories just can't be written. Number 6. Frane Selak. The world's most unluckiest man and number 6 on our list is Frane Selak of Croatia. Frane has had a lucky number 7 near-death experiences, with the first instance happening all the way back in 1962, when the train Frane was riding derailed and crashed into the river. The other 17 passengers of the car drowned while Frane was pulled to safety. He was able to walk away with a broken arm and hypothermia. The next year, Frane boarded a plane for the first time in his life, only to be blown out of a malfunctioning door mid-air. The plane crashed, killing 19 people, but Frane landed in a haystack. 3 years after the plane crash, the bus Frane was sitting in skidded and landed straight into a river, drowning 4. Frane managed to survive with just a few cuts and bruises. Then, in 1970, his car caught fire while he was driving. Frayn was able to escape, though, before the fuel tank exploded. Incidents like these continued all throughout his life, until in 2010 when he was maybe the luckiest he's ever been, winning over $1 million in the lottery. Being the great guy he is, Frayn gave most of the money to friends and family. Now 91, he's still alive and without any issues. Number 5. Maarten de Jonge. Maarten de Jonge is a Dutch professional cyclist who rides for a Malaysia-based cycling team. He spends a lot of time traveling in airplanes, specifically Malaysia Airlines. But his frugal spending habits and love of a good deal saved his life, twice. In March of 2014, de Jonge had tickets for a trip to Kuala Lumpur, to Beijing, and then to Taiwan. But after having found a direct flight to his final destination, he changed his flight and walked away from Malaysia Airlines MH370, the infamous flight that disappeared. Luckily for de Jonge, he landed safely and dodged a bullet, but there's no way someone can get that lucky twice, right? Wrong. Because de Jonge booked a flight on Malaysia Airlines MH17, which was shot down out of the sky over the Ukraine. He saw that he could save money by changing his flight again, and at the last minute, he managed to avoid disaster. So the moral of this story is that if Maarten de Jonge is on your flight, but makes any last-minute changes, you better follow suit. Number 4. Violet Jessop. Violet Jessop is one of the luckiest seafaring people in history. She survived the sinking of not one, not two, but 3 now famous ships. In 1910, at the age of 23, Violet got a job working on the RMS Olympic, which crashed into a British warship in 1911. While the ship was able to remain afloat, it was still a devastating experience for both vessels and everyone on board. Just 1 year later, she was a passenger on board the Titanic on its ill-fated maiden voyage. And because of the women and children first rule, she was quickly evacuated, albeit with a stranger's baby thrust into her arms. Her boat was rescued shortly thereafter, but as we said, this wasn't her final brush with near tragedy. A few years after the Titanic, in 1916, Violet was working on the RMS Britannic, which had been repurposed as the hospital ship for World War I. Only 55 minutes after disembarking, there was an explosion on board that killed 30 passengers. Violet, of course, was okay and went on to work on board ships still for the next 34 years. Number 3. Patrick Willis. Hitting a hole-in-one is a pretty difficult feat. Even the best golfers will retire without having even gotten one. But American golfer Patrick Willis was able to hit 3 holes-in-one not just in his career, but in one round in 2015. The odds of scoring a hole-in-one are about 1 in 5,000. The odds of hitting 2 in a round are 1 in 67 million. But to make 3 in one round, now the odds are up in the billions. Naturally, Willis won the tournament that day, and his sons also participated, placing 2nd and 3rd respectively. Looks like the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. But when Willis had shown up for the tournament that day, he already had 22 holes-in-one under his belt over the course of 47 years. But certainly, that day was a one-of-a-kind experience for any golfer. Number 2. Motoyuki Mabuchi. The year is 2008, the setting, Las Vegas, for the World Series of Poker. Motoyuki Mabuchi is playing his best hand against Justin Phillips. As the hand progresses, Mabuchi is able to pick up 4 aces. His opponent, Phillips, plays it cool until Mabuchi goes all in, yelling at him to gamble. Mabuchi has it in the bag with a hand like that, but unbeknownst to Mabuchi, Phillips is hiding something, a royal flush. And as both players show their hands, all is revealed. Mabuchi is out of the entire tournament in an event that had a 1 in 2.7 billion chance of happening. Needless to say, Mabuchi walked away pretty embarrassed that day. Number 1. Laura Bruxton. In 2001, in Staffordshire, England, a 10-year-old girl named Laura Buxton wrote a note with her name, address, and a message for whoever receives the letter to write back. She attached it to a helium balloon and let it fly. The balloon had flown for about 140 miles in 10 days before finally deflating and falling to the ground. So who found the balloon? None other than Laura Buxton, but not the Laura Buxton you're thinking of. This was another girl with the exact same name as the owner of the balloon. So Laura got a phone call from Laura, and it turns out that their name wasn't the only unlikely thing they had in common. They were the same height, same hair color, same grade in school, had a 3-year-old black Labrador, a rabbit, and a guinea pig. The two Lauras quickly became friends and have kept in touch to this day. because who better to be your best friend than yourself? Watch our Obscure playlist for more top 15 videos about the more obscure subjects in our world. Sit back, relax, and binge watch all of our best and most obscure videos.